Hello everyone. So I'm obviously in a very different setting from where I usually film these videos. I'm at work, but I did have a few hours to kill before I have to go back, so I decided I would just talk about this topic of climate change that is hitting the news. I mean, not as much as I would like it to be. I mean, there's other stories floating around right now. Omarosa is a big thing. Um, which I don't necessarily regard as that important. We have the recent conviction of Paul Manafort for fraud. Also, Michael Cohen, Trump's ex-lawyer, pleading guilty and implicating the president in an illegal payment. I believe this has to do with the Stormy Daniels payment, and this violated campaign finance law. And so Cohen pled guilty to that. Also, another big story is the U.S. military saying they're going to stay in Iraq as long as is needed, basically indefinitely. And we've been in Iraq since 2003, and we're all it's like, yeah, we've already been staying there indefinitely, and like they just doubled down. But I think it's important. Despite the fact that it's more or less word games that they're playing with us, it's like, yeah, that's what you've been doing. But I think it's important when the state actually comes out and says it, because it shows, really there's a lot more horrible things probably to come. But I want to talk about climate change because Trump rolled back a lot of regulations that were created under Obama to help with CO2 emissions and try and uh, limit the coal industry. People have called it like a war on coal, whatever. But however you want to characterize it, um, we need to actually take a serious stance on climate change and um, limit the amount of emissions that we're doing. And what Trump is doing is the opposite of that. So let's go to the Hill and see what they have to say. President Trump is planning to introduce a proposal that would allow states to establish emissions standards for coal-fired power plants rather than expediting their elimination. So he's allowing the states to basically make the call, and establish their own standards. I mean, what if you have a state that doesn't want any standards practically? A state like West Virginia. I'm not trying to say West Virginia like they're bad people, not at all. Um, However, like they're very reliant on the coal industry, so it's obviously an incentive for them to have less restrictions, so that they can cut corners, have and they don't have to spend as much to basically not pollute and regulate the industry. It makes it easier for them to make a buck. So this is why you need regulations, because people they're always going to look for ways to cut corners and save an extra buck. So that's why it's needed. The move, which marks a significant reversal of a key Obama era policy, is expected to result in the release of at least 12 times the amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere over the next 10 years, compared to the amount projected under the former President Obama's Clean Power Plan in the same time, the Washington Post reported. The move comes amid multiple warnings from scientists that failing to reduce carbon emissions will have dire consequences for the climate. So it should be relatively obvious that this is a problem, and instead of listening to the actual scientists, Scott Pruitt's not in the EPA anymore. He left relatively recently, but the guy who replaced him is just a coal lobbyist, so not much better. Um, and they regularly just talk to the people in the coal industry and block out scientists. It's documented that they're blocking scientists in the EPA. So this is not good, and they do this. Like it's kind of a winning strategy perhaps I mean, I don't know necessarily for like crossover voters or whatever, but it's good for Trump's base for sure, because they talk about, oh, the economy is going to be great, you're going to have more jobs as a result of this. Look, my stance on this, I mean, you could make this argument for pretty much all of fossil fuels, but I'll talk about it in the context of coal, just because that seems to be kind of the biggest impact right now, and kind of the biggest topic of conversation in terms of climate change right now. We should be taking people that worked in the coal industry in West Virginia and all throughout the country. We should be, it doesn't have to be a government agency. It could be just like a temporary program to help train people to have another job in the energy field that's more renewable energy, that it's something that's going to be for the future. I mean, coal is a thing of the past. It's not going to be around forever. I don't think the government should be, lending support to the coal industry any more than the government should be lending support to the horse and buggy industry. It's a thing of the past. It's not going to be forever, because and certainly because we're destroying the planet, and the more we keep doing this, the shorter time we have to try and reverse the trends. So I just think that the government should invest in trying to help people, because that's, for a lot of people, that is kind of what they know, that's the industry that they've grown up around, and a lot of times they don't have a lot of other options but to work in these places. So I understand the concern in terms of like losing jobs by trying to eliminate coal jobs. I get that, but that's where I think the government should step in and try and help people. And it's happened in the past. We've had the New Deal. We've had similar programs that help people get back into the workforce. So I just don't think that it's too difficult and too much to ask for the government to try and help in that way. So let's go to some other sources here. We have Axios. The EPA estimates that there would be between 470 and 1,400 additional premature annual deaths by 2030 under its new coal plant regulations. And someone at the EPA claimed it's a minimal number compared to all the emissions we're dealing with. But, as I was saying, it's an effort by Trump to roll back the even small amounts of progress we made under Obama. I mean, look, Obama, he I'm sorry, I'm kind of like stammering with this. Everyone knows, who knows me, knows my opinion on Obama. Like, he was a centrist. In power, he ran more or less as progressive, but he did a lot of good things, and a lot of those things were just half measures to kind of help us get in the right direction. The Paris Agreement was a good step in the right direction. Obama's plans to help try and get to get emissions down, that's good, but there wasn't enough attention on trying to really invest in renewable energy, and we'll get to that more specifically in a little bit. But just like compare what the government gives to the fossil fuel industry to what they give to renewable energy. It's not even a comparison. The fossil fuel industry gets far and away more money, and kind of ridiculous actually, because like these corporations have record profits and they're still getting billions of dollars in subsidies, and that's just outright ridiculous. Like, what more do we have to know about the fossil fuel industry? What more research do we have to do to get that to a better state? We need more research and development in renewable energy and green energy. That's the future of the world, and we're not investing our time in that, and that's a big problem. And like I'm saying, Obama helped us get in the right direction, and as far as that's concerned. But I wish he was more ambitious. I wish he had been more ambitious in trying to tackle that. And then this is from the Huffington Post. So when this was announced, they sent out a document that kind of more overviewed everything that was going on in terms of what the EPA thought and what the change is going to represent to people. And it says, in the 236-page notice to the Federal Register, the EPA questioned the continued rise of renewable energy, suggesting that the trend is not certain because the industry uses subsidies, but solar and wind energy receives a fraction of the federal subsidies allotted to the fossil fuel industries. The EPA made no mention of the more than $20 billion the U.S. pays each year on fossil fuel subsidies, or the roughly $34 billion proposed by Trump to prop up coal and nuclear power plants. Now, just as like a quick side note, so some people are kind of against nuclear power. I'm not necessarily. I think it just needs to be well regulated, and human error is a big problem. I get it. But if we do have strong regulations, I think nuclear power is fairly good, and it's a fairly green alternative to fossil fuels. So I don't necessarily agree with that, or disagree with giving money to nuclear power plants, but we should be giving no money to coal, to the industry, to the people that are producing coal, and that's what they're doing. They're doing that to get energy. We should not be giving those people money. As I was saying, we could give money and create a program to help train former coal workers to do other jobs. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing, because it's just not going to be around forever. People talk about clean coal. Trump does all the time, and it's just not a thing. It doesn't occur. It's really just propaganda, I would say, and the people that don't believe in climate change at this point, they latch on to like whatever they can to try and make it work. Basically, like, oh, clean coal, now we can get away with it. No, you can't. And we're seeing the science is saying that 12 times the emissions than it would have been under Obama's plan. So the clock is ticking, and that's why I think this issue is important. And look, the media doesn't report it. It just doesn't report it as much as stuff like Omarosa or Russia, or even the story about staying in Iraq indefinitely. The media doesn't do its job well. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. And so a lot of independent voices out there have to try and call these things out. And going back to climate change, like this affects the entire world. It doesn't just affect our country. We're the second largest emitter of CO2. I believe first is China. And then a lot of people will even use that fact to try and obfuscate and be like, oh, well, we're not the worst, so I mean China's way worse, so we shouldn't. No, you need to worry about it. And I think even trying to advocate that to China, yeah, do what you have to do, but we should be leading by example. I mean, like, we're always talking about America being great and like we're the star of the world, or I don't know what you want to call it, but we don't lead in all of the important areas. Whether you talk about climate change, whether you talk about healthcare, the fact that we're an empire and going all over the world, bombing places, we're not that great. I guess I almost agree with Andrew Cuomo. He said America was never that great. The difference is, I think someone in his political position, he needs to. It's like, yeah, you're right by saying America was never really that great, but you have you kind of have to articulate that point more, and it may not come across the way you want it. So you kind of have to choose your words more as a politician, just because you have to think about perception. But it's true that we aren't that great. We have terrible health outcomes, and a lot of that is related to our climate policies. As I just read, you're going to have premature deaths, um, and it's not a story. Why is it not a story for the media to talk about? Policy by Trump will directly affect premature deaths. Like it's never actually, like, even a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's never an option to be like, oh, well, maybe we should try and do something to limit that number. If this policy is really enacted and it's going to do this, like we have to go and change it. But no one is pressuring the administration to do that, and that's a problem. So I'm really hoping that there's some kind of blue wave in November, or something that will reverse this policy, because we're on a crash course for disaster. We're headed straight for a brick wall, pretty much, if we don't change our climate policies.